He opened the security app expecting to catch her breaking protocol. 17 caregivers before her had failed, stolen from him, pitied his daughters, or simply walked away when the reality became too much. So when Marcus Chen saw those two small wheelchairs sitting empty beside the piano, his stomach dropped. Then he saw them. His twin daughters, Lily and Rose, the girls 3 different neurologists said would never stand, were on their feet, wobbling, trembling, but standing, taking steps, walking toward the outstretched arms of a woman who was supposed to follow orders, not perform miracles. Marcus's phone slipped from his hand. His back hit the wall. The tech billionaire who'd built an empire on logic and data watched the impossible unfold on a screen in his own home. 3 years ago, Marcus Chen lost the only person who ever saw past his success to the man beneath it. Catherine died 2 hours after delivering their twin daughters. Placental abruption, sudden, catastrophic, irreversible. One moment she was squeezing his hand, exhausted but glowing. The next, alarms were screaming and doctors were rushing her away. Marcus never got to say goodbye. He held her hand until it went cold, then walked out to the NICU, where 2 premature babies fought for their lives. Lily and Rose, 3 pounds each. Translucent skin, tubes everywhere. The doctors didn't wait long to deliver the second blow. Mr. Chen, the oxygen deprivation during delivery caused significant brain damage. We're seeing indicators of cerebral palsy, severe. The girls will likely never walk independently, possibly never. Marcus heard the words, but they didn't register. Not then. He was still trying to process that Catherine, vibrant, laughing Catherine, who danced through their penthouse at 3 in the morning, was gone. Weeks passed, then months. The girls survived, but they didn't thrive. They sat in custom wheelchairs, their small bodies rigid, their eyes distant. Marcus hired the best pediatric specialists money could buy, flew in therapists from Switzerland and Japan, purchased equipment that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Nothing changed. Lily and Rose didn't hit milestones. They didn't babble or reach for toys. They sat in their wheelchairs in the sunroom of his San Francisco penthouse, 2 beautiful statues that breathed but didn't live. And Marcus, alone on his glass tower overlooking the city, started to accept what the doctors had told him. His daughters would never walk, never run through the rooms Catherine had decorated with such hope, never dance the way their mother had danced. He buried that dream right next to Catherine. Then came the caregivers, 17 in 32 months. The first quit after 3 weeks. Said watching the girls was emotionally draining. The second lasted 2 months before Marcus caught her on her phone during therapy sessions, scrolling through social media while his daughters sat ignored. The third seemed perfect until his head of security discovered she'd been selling information about the girls' medical conditions to a tabloid blogger. $800 for photos of their adaptive equipment. After that, something broke inside Marcus. One caregiver stole Catherine's jewelry. Another accessed his personal files and tried blackmail. Each one arrived with credentials and references and sympathetic smiles. Each one left with his trust bleeding out behind them. Marcus stopped seeing people as people. He saw risks, liabilities, threats. He installed cameras in every room of the penthouse, living areas, therapy spaces, even the hallways. 47 cameras total, feeding into a monitoring system he checked obsessively. He watched footage at night, rewinding and zooming, searching for the lie, the angle, the inevitable betrayal he knew was coming. Control became his only protection. So when Elena Rodriguez walked through his door, 27 years old, quiet, composed, carrying a worn backpack and a folder of references, Marcus didn't see a person. He saw the 18th failure waiting to happen. No improvising, he told her, not looking up from her background check results. No bonding, no hope speeches, follow the medical protocol exactly. The neurologists have made their prognosis clear. Elena nodded, her dark eyes steady. I understand. But she didn't understand. Or maybe she understood too well, because Elena didn't follow his rules. She sang to those girls when no one was watching, soft Spanish lullabies her grandmother had taught her. She moved their legs in patterns the physical therapists never prescribed. She whispered words of encouragement like she believed they could hear her, like she believed they could become more than their diagnosis allowed. And Marcus watched it all through his cameras. At first, he watched to catch her making mistakes, document her failures, build his case for termination. Then he watched because he couldn't look away, because something was happening in that penthouse. Something small at first, barely noticeable. But there, Rose's fingers twitched when Elena sang. Lily held her head up longer than she ever had before. Both girls' eyes would track Elena as she moved around the room, following her, seeing her. Marcus told himself it meant nothing. Random muscle spasms. Coincidence. The doctors had been clear about what was and wasn't possible. He told himself hope was dangerous. But late at night, alone in his office with the blue glow of monitors lighting his face, Marcus Chen watched a stranger fight for his daughters with nothing but patience and belief. And somewhere deep in his chest, in a place he thought had died with Catherine, something started to crack. He didn't trust it. He couldn't. Because hope, when you've buried it that deep, doesn't feel like relief. It feels like a trap. But before we go any further, hit that subscribe button like this video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. If you've ever felt like hope was too risky, like believing again might break you, this story is for you. Sometimes miracles don't ask for permission, they just show up. The penthouse woke up the same way every morning, quiet. Not peaceful quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest and makes you aware of every breath. Marcus stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows in his bedroom, coffee growing cold in his hands, watching the sun rise over San Francisco Bay. The Golden Gate Bridge glowed orange in the early light. Below, the city was already moving, cars on the bridge, boats in the bay, people starting their days. His world felt frozen by comparison. Behind him, down the long hallway that led to the therapy room, he heard the soft hum of a motorized wheelchair. The night nurse was moving one of the girls, probably Lily. Lily liked to sit by the window when the morning light came through just right. Marcus didn't turn around. He used to. In the beginning, right after Catherine died, Marcus would rush to every sound, every cry, every small movement. He'd sit between their cribs for hours, watching their tiny chests rise and fall, terrified that if he looked away, something would go wrong. Catherine would have been better at this. She'd wanted children more than anything. 6 years of trying, 4 rounds of IVF, 3 miscarriages that had nearly destroyed her each time, and when she finally got pregnant with twins, she'd cried for an entire day. Happy tears, the kind that come when something you've wanted desperately finally becomes real. Marcus remembered the nursery she'd designed. Soft gray walls with hand-painted cherry blossoms climbing from floor to ceiling. 2 cribs positioned side by side so the girls could see each other. A rocking chair by the window where she'd planned to read to them. That nursery sat empty now. The girls slept in the therapy room. Medical beds with adjustable frames and safety rails. Monitors tracking their breathing and heart rates through the night. The beautiful room with the cherry blossoms had become storage for equipment they'd tried once and abandoned. Standing frames, gait trainers, adaptive toys the girls never reached for. Marcus took a sip of cold coffee and winced. The penthouse was too big, 4,000 square feet for a man who only used 4 rooms. His office, his bedroom, the kitchen when he remembered to eat, and the gym where he punished himself on a treadmill at 5 every morning. Everything else felt like a museum, preserved but lifeless. He'd bought this place for Catherine. She'd loved the views, the light, the way you could see both the bay and the city from different windows. She'd said it felt like living in the sky. Now it felt like a very expensive prison. Marcus set the coffee mug in the sink and walked toward his office. The hallway stretched long and pristine, Family photos used to line these walls. Catherine insisted on it. Homes need memories, she'd say. Otherwise, they're just expensive boxes. Marcus had taken them down 6 months after she died. He couldn't pass her smile 20 times a day. Couldn't see the hope in her eyes, the way she'd looked at him like he could solve any problem, fix anything that was broken. He'd failed her, failed their daughters, failed every promise he'd made when he'd held her hand in that hospital room and sworn he'd take care of them. The frames had left faint rectangular shadows on the white walls, ghosts of a life that almost happened. Marcus pushed open his office door and sat at his desk. 3 large monitors glowed on the wall. Living room, hallway, therapy room. There they were, his daughters. Rose sat in her pink wheelchair, staring at the bookshelf. Lily was by the window just as he'd guessed, morning light catching the gold in her brown hair. Both girls wore soft cotton pajamas. Both sat perfectly still except for the gentle rise and fall of breathing. Elena moved between them, adjusting blankets, repositioning a stuffed animal that had fallen. Her movements were careful, deliberate, like she understood that this room held something fragile. Marcus watched her hands. 17 caregivers, 17 failures, 17 reasons to believe she would be no different. But she'd been here 4 weeks now, and she hadn't stolen anything, hadn't complained, hadn't made excuses or cut corners or taken photos she shouldn't take. Just quiet consistency. That's what worried him most. Elena had a routine that Marcus found increasingly difficult to ignore. Every morning she arrived in the therapy room at exactly 7:15. She'd greet the night nurse, review the girls' sleep charts, and then spend the first 10 minutes just sitting with them. Not doing therapy, not following the protocol binder the neurologists had created. Just sitting. Marcus noticed this through the cameras. It bothered him at first. He was paying her to work, not to meditate. But then he realized something that made his chest tighten. She wasn't sitting idle. She was watching, learning, studying the way Rose's left hand curled when she was uncomfortable, the way Lily's breathing changed when she needed repositioning, the way both girls' eyes would flicker when they were processing something, even though they never responded outwardly. She was learning his daughters in a way Marcus had stopped trying to years ago. On her 5th morning, Elena brought something new into the therapy room. Marcus was in his office, coffee in hand, reviewing quarterly projections when movement on the monitor caught his eye. Elena was pulling something from her backpack, a small Bluetooth speaker, nothing fancy. She set it on the shelf and pressed play. Piano music filled the room, something classical, gentle. Marcus's finger hovered over the intercom button. This wasn't in the protocol. The girls had specific sound therapy sessions twice a week, administered by a licensed audiologist. Random music wasn't part of the plan, but he didn't press the button because Rose turned her head. It was small, just a few degrees to the right, but Marcus saw it clearly on the screen. His daughter, who spent most days staring at the same spot on the bookshelf, turned toward the sound. Elena noticed too. She didn't make a fuss, didn't clap or celebrate. She just smiled softly and adjusted the volume slightly louder. Lily's fingers twitched against her armrest. Marcus leaned closer to the monitor, his projections forgotten. Elena knelt beside Lily's wheelchair, moving slowly, deliberately. She didn't touch her right away, just positioned herself in Lily's line of sight and waited. "You like that?" Elena asked quietly. "It's Chopin. My abuela used to play it on Sunday mornings." Lily didn't respond, but her fingers twitched again. Elena reached out and placed her hand near Lily's, not touching, just close enough that Lily could feel the warmth if she wanted. She stayed like that for a long moment. Marcus's throat tightened. When was the last time he'd sat with his daughters like that? When was the last time he'd just been present without an agenda, without checking monitors or reviewing therapy reports or calculating how much the latest specialist consultation was costing? He couldn't remember. That afternoon, Marcus found himself walking toward the therapy room. He told himself he needed to check the equipment calibration, ensure the wheelchairs were properly maintained. But when he reached the door and heard Elena's voice inside, he stopped. She was reading, not a medical manual or therapy guide, but a children's story. Something about a caterpillar who wanted to fly. "Everyone told him caterpillars don't fly," Elena read, her voice gentle and clear. But the little caterpillar didn't listen. He climbed to the top of the branch every single day, and every single day he tried. Marcus peered through the crack in the door. The girls were arranged in a semicircle around her. Elena sat cross-legged on the floor, the book open in her lap. Her eyes moved between the pages and their faces, checking, connecting. "Did he ever fly?" she asked them. "What do you think?" Silence. But both girls were looking at her, actually looking, their eyes focused and present in a way Marcus hadn't seen in months. "He did," Elena continued softly, "but not the way he expected. He became a butterfly." Marcus stepped back from the door. His chest felt strange, tight and loose at the same time. He walked back to his office without entering the room. That night, reviewing the footage, he watched her read that story 3 more times. Watched the way she changed her voice for different characters. Watched the way she paused to let the words settle. Watched his daughters watch her. Something was shifting in that penthouse. Marcus could feel it. He just didn't trust it yet. Week 3. Elena stopped following the protocol entirely. It started small. The music, the stories, things Marcus could dismiss as harmless additions. But then it grew. One evening, Marcus pulled up the afternoon footage and nearly choked on his whiskey. Elena was on the floor with Rose. She had his daughter's small legs in her hands, moving them slowly, rhythmically. Left, right, like Rose was walking, like her muscles remembered something her brain had forgotten. Marcus's jaw clenched. This wasn't in any therapy plan. No specialist had prescribed this. She was improvising, breaking every rule he'd set. He reached for his phone to call her, fire her, end this before it went any further. But then Rose laughed. Not a big laugh, just a small sound, barely more than breath. But Marcus heard it through the speakers, and his hand froze over the phone. His daughter was laughing. When was the last time he'd heard that sound? Marcus set the phone down. His hands were shaking. He kept watching. Elena moved to Lily next. She positioned a small stuffed rabbit just beyond reach on the wheelchair tray, too far for Lily to grab without effort. "Come on, sweetheart," Elena said softly. "You can do it. Just a little stretch." Lily's arm stayed still. Elena waited, patient, unhurried. "I know you can," she whispered. "I believe in you." Marcus watched the screen, holding his breath without realizing it. Lily's fingers twitched, her arm moved, slowly, painfully slowly, reaching forward. Her small hand stretched toward the rabbit. She touched it. Elena's face broke into the widest smile. "Yes, look at you. Look at what you just did." Lily's fingers curled around the rabbit's ear. Marcus's eyes burned. He rewound the footage, watched it again and again, that small arm reaching, those tiny fingers closing around fabric. Such a simple movement, something any other 3-year-old would do without thinking. But his daughter had just done the impossible. Marcus rubbed his face with both hands. This was dangerous, all of it. Elena was giving his daughters false hope, pushing them beyond what the doctors said they could do. When she failed, and she would fail, the disappointment would destroy them, destroy him. He should fire her tomorrow morning, first thing. But instead of drafting a termination letter, Marcus pulled up more footage. Days of it, weeks. He watched Elena work with Rose and Lily every afternoon, the same exercises, the same gentle encouragement, the same unshakable belief that they could do more than their diagnosis allowed. And he watched his daughters respond. Rose holding her head steady for 10 seconds, then 15, then 30. Lily reaching for toys, her movements clumsy but intentional. Both girls making sounds, small vocalizations that might have been attempts at words. Marcus opened a new browser window with trembling hands. He typed, "Neuroplasticity, cerebral palsy children." Articles flooded the screen, medical journals, case studies, research from Johns Hopkins, Stanford, the Mayo Clinic. He clicked the first one. Early intervention in pediatric cerebral palsy cases. has shown remarkable results in neural pathway development. The infant and toddler brain demonstrates extraordinary plasticity. He clicked another. Repetitive motor pattern training can stimulate the brain to form new connections, bypassing damaged areas. And another, with consistent targeted intervention, children with CP have achieved mobility outcomes far exceeding initial prognosis. Marcus read until his eyes burned, until the words blurred together, until 3 a.m. crept past and the penthouse sat silent around him. Everything Elena had said, the neural pathways, the brain's ability to rewire itself, the importance of belief combined with consistency, it was all there, published, peer-reviewed, real, and he'd never looked, not once in 3 years. He'd taken those first neurologists at their word, accepted their verdict like a death sentence, stopped researching, stopped questioning, stopped hoping. Marcus closed the laptop and sat in darkness. His daughters were improving, actually measurably improving, doing things those initial specialists said they'd never do, and he'd almost fired the woman responsible, twice. The shame hit him like a physical weight. For 3 years, he'd poured money into maintaining his daughter's limitations. Expensive wheelchairs, medical equipment, nurses who kept them comfortable in their diagnosis. But he'd never once fought for something more. Elena had been here 5 weeks, making $15 an hour, and she'd accomplished what his millions hadn't touched, because she believed. And he'd stopped believing the day Catherine died. Marcus's eyes burned. His throat closed. He'd failed his daughters, not by loving them too little, but by expecting too little, by accepting defeat before the fight even started. Catherine would never have accepted it. She would have researched every journal, consulted every specialist, tried every method. She would have fought with everything she had. But Catherine was gone, and Marcus had buried his fight with her, until Elena walked through his door and showed him what he'd forgotten, that giving up was a choice, and he'd been choosing it every single day. Marcus didn't plan to confront her. It just happened. 6 weeks of watching through screens. 6 weeks of footage that kept him awake at night. 6 weeks of seeing his daughters respond to a woman who broke every rule he'd set. He couldn't take it anymore. Wednesday morning, Marcus left his office and walked down the hallway toward the therapy room. His footsteps echoed against the marble floors. Each step felt heavier than the last. He didn't knock, just pushed the door open and stood there. Elena was on the floor with both girls. She had their small legs positioned in her hands, moving them in that same rhythmic pattern, left, right, like she was teaching their muscles to remember something they'd never learned. She looked up when the door opened. No surprise in her eyes, no fear, just calm acknowledgement. "Mr. Chen." Marcus's voice came out harder than he intended. "What are you doing?" Elena didn't stop the movement. "Motor pattern training. It helps build neural pathways. That's not in the protocol." "No, sir, it's not." Marcus stepped into the room. "I gave you specific instructions. Follow the medical plan. No improvising. No experimental treatments." Elena gently lowered the girl's legs and stood up. She wiped her hands on her jeans and faced him directly. "The medical plan has them sitting in wheelchairs 16 hours a day with minimal stimulation. That's not treatment, Mr. Chen. That's maintenance." Marcus's jaw tightened. "The doctors, 3 different neurologists, gave us a prognosis based on years of research and experience." "They gave you a prognosis based on statistics," Elena said quietly. "They looked at scans and charts and told you what usually happens. They didn't tell you what's possible. They're specialists. They've seen hundreds of cases like this. Have they seen your daughters?" The question hung in the air. Marcus stared at her. "Excuse me." Elena took a breath. "Rose and Lily aren't statistics, Mr. Chen. They're not case studies or data points. They're children, and children deserve someone who sees them, not their diagnosis." Marcus felt heat rise in his chest. "You think you know better than doctors who've studied this for decades?" I think I know that giving up on a child is the one thing guaranteed to fail. Silence. Marcus's hands were shaking from anger or something else he couldn't tell. You're filling their heads with false hope, he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. When this doesn't work, and it won't, they'll be devastated. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Something shifted in her eyes. Not pity, something deeper. They're 3 years old, Mr. Chen. They don't know what false hope is, they only know what they feel. And right now they feel someone believing in them. She paused. Maybe for the first time. The words landed like a slap. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it. Elena turned back to Rose and Lily, kneeling beside their wheelchairs. You hired me to care for them, she said softly, not looking at Marcus. That's what I'm doing. She resumed the leg movements, gentle, patient, consistent. Marcus stood there watching her ignore him. His mind screamed to fire her. Right now, call the agency, have her replaced by morning, but his feet wouldn't move. Because deep down, in a place he'd locked away, a voice whispered something he didn't want to hear. What if she's right? Marcus turned and walked out without another word, but he didn't fire her. 2 weeks later, everything changed. Marcus was in his office on a Thursday afternoon reviewing a presentation for his board meeting the next day. Numbers on the screen, projections, growth metrics, the kind of work that used to consume him, that used to matter. Now it all felt hollow. His phone buzzed on the desk. Motion alert. Living room. Marcus frowned. The girls were supposed to be in the therapy room at this hour. He picked up his phone and opened the security app, expecting to see Elena moving them for an activity change. The image took a moment to register. 2 wheelchairs sat against the wall near the piano. Empty. Marcus's stomach dropped. His first thought was panic. Something happened. An emergency. The nurse had to rush them somewhere. Then he saw them. Center of the living room, hardwood floor gleaming in the afternoon light. Rose and Lily, standing, his paralyzed daughters. The girls 3 neurologists said would never stand. They were upright, wobbly, trembling, their small legs shaking with effort, but standing on their own 2 feet. Marcus's breath stopped. Elena knelt on the floor about 6 feet away from them, her arms stretched wide open. Tears streamed down her face. Come on, my loves, she whispered. Come to me. You can do it. 1 step. Marcus couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't process what he was seeing. Rose moved first. Her small foot lifted from the ground, hovered in the air for an eternal second, then landed again. An inch forward, a step. Marcus's hand flew to his mouth. Lily went next, more cautious. Her legs trembled violently, but she moved. 1 foot, then the other, 2 steps. A sound escaped Marcus's throat, something between a gasp and a sob. The girls were walking, his daughters were walking. Rose took another step, then another, her arms outstretched for balance, her face scrunched with concentration. Lily followed, slower, more careful, but moving. They were walking toward Elena, toward her open arms, toward the woman who'd refused to accept impossible. Marcus watched his daughters cross 6 feet of living room floor, 6 feet that might as well have been the Grand Canyon for all the doctors said it was impossible. His phone slipped from his fingers. It clattered against the desk, but he didn't hear it. His knees buckled. Marcus slid down from his chair, back scraping against the desk until he sat on the floor of his office. His legs wouldn't hold him. On the phone screen, face down but still playing, he could hear Elena's voice. Yes, oh my God, yes, look at you. Look at what you're doing. The girls reached her. She gathered both of them into her arms, pulling them against her chest, sobbing openly. I knew it, she cried. I knew you could. I knew it. Marcus sat on his office floor, unable to move. Tears poured down his face. His whole body shook. 3 years of doctors saying never. 3 years of specialists confirming impossible. 3 years of accepting that his daughters would spend their lives in wheelchairs. And there they were, standing, walking, reaching toward a woman who'd refused to believe what the world told her. Marcus pressed both hands against his face and wept. Not quiet tears, not controlled grief. This was something deeper, something breaking open inside him that had been locked away since the day Catherine died. Every failure, every betrayal, every night spent watching screens instead of holding his daughters, the shame, the fear, the hope he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed. It all came flooding out in waves that shook his entire body. His daughters could walk, and he'd almost given up on them. Marcus didn't know how long he sat on that floor, minutes, maybe longer. When he finally found the strength to stand, his legs felt hollow. He grabbed the edge of the desk and pulled himself up. His phone lay face down, still showing the living room feed. Marcus didn't pick it up. He didn't need to watch anymore. He walked out of his office on unsteady feet, down the long hallway, past the empty picture frames on the walls, past the silence he'd built around himself like armor. The living room door was open. He stopped in the doorway. Elena sat on the floor, both girls in her lap. They were exhausted from the effort, small bodies limp against her chest. She held them like they were made of something precious. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. She looked up when she sensed him there. Their eyes met. Marcus expected to see triumph in her face. Pride. A look that said, "I told you so." But that's not what he saw. He saw compassion. For him, Elena didn't say anything, just watched him with those steady, dark eyes, holding his daughters like she'd always held them, like they mattered. Marcus's legs gave out again. He knelt in the doorway, unable to take another step. "How?" His voice cracked. "How did you know?" Elena looked down at the girls, then back at him. "I didn't know, Mr. Chen." Her voice was soft, gentle. "I just believed." Something broke inside Marcus. The last wall, the final barrier. He crawled forward on his knees until he reached them. His hands shook as he touched Rose's face, then Lily's, his daughters. For 3 years he'd watched them through screens, loved them from a distance, kept his heart locked away because losing more would kill him. But they were here, alive, fighting, growing, and he'd almost missed it. Marcus gathered both girls into his arms, pressed his face against their small heads, breathed in their scent. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." He said it over and over, an apology for every day he'd spent hiding, every night he'd chosen fear over faith, every moment he'd let grief steal from them. Elena quietly moved back, giving him space. But Marcus reached out and grabbed her hand. "Stay," he said, "please." She nodded. They sat there together on the living room floor, a broken father holding his daughters, a faithful woman who'd refused to give up. 2 wheelchairs pushed against the wall, suddenly obsolete. Marcus looked at Elena through blurred vision. "You gave them their legs." She shook her head slowly. "No, Mr. Chen, they always had their legs. I just reminded them they could try." Marcus closed his eyes. Catherine would have loved this woman. Catherine would have loved this moment. And somewhere, he believed, she was watching. The afternoon light shifted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood. The city buzzed below, oblivious to the miracle that had just unfolded 40 stories above it. Marcus held his daughters tighter and let himself feel something he'd forgotten existed. Hope. Not fragile hope, not cautious hope, real hope, the kind that costs everything and gives back more. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Elena smiled, wiping her eyes. Now you show up. You work from home more. You get on the floor with them. You try and fail and try again. You be their father, not their manager." Marcus nodded, his throat too tight to speak. "And we keep going," Elena continued. "The walking is just the beginning. There's so much more they can do, Mr. Chen, so much more they will do, if we don't give up." "I won't," Marcus said, his voice firm despite the tears. "I promise, never again." He looked down at Rose and Lily, their eyes heavy with exhaustion, their small bodies warm against his chest. For 3 years he'd been afraid. Afraid of hoping, afraid of trying, afraid of losing more than he'd already lost. But watching his daughters take those first impossible steps, Marcus finally understood what Catherine had been trying to tell him all along. Life isn't about protecting the people you love from every disappointment, every failure, every fall. It's about being there when they fall, helping them get back up, trying with them. It's about showing them that miracles don't need permission. They just need someone brave enough to believe they're possible. 6 months later. Rose and Lily walked everywhere now, still wobbly sometimes, still needing help on stairs. But walking, Elena stayed, not as a caregiver anymore, but as family. Auntie Elena, the girls called her in their growing vocabularies. Marcus restructured his entire life. He worked from home 4 days a week, attended every therapy session, got on the floor and played and sang and tried, even when he felt ridiculous. And slowly, the penthouse stopped feeling like a museum. It felt like a home. One evening, Marcus stood at the living room window, watching the sun set over the bay. Behind him, he heard the sound he'd once thought he'd never hear. "Daddy, watch!" He turned. Rose and Lily were racing across the living room, their small legs pumping, Elena pretending to chase them, all three of them laughing. Marcus's chest tightened, but this time with joy, not grief. He thought of Catherine, wished she could see this, see what their daughters had become, see what love and faith and refusing to give up had created. But maybe she could see. Maybe she'd been watching all along, waiting for him to find his way back to hope. Marcus knelt down and opened his arms. "Come here, my loves." The girls ran to him, crashing into his chest with squeals of delight. He held them tight, breathing them in, grateful for every impossible moment. "I love you," he whispered. "So much." "Love you too, Daddy," they said in unison. And in that moment, Marcus Chen finally understood. The greatest miracle wasn't that his daughters could walk. It was that he'd finally learned how to hope again. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.